Welcome this morning. I'm Amarachi Ubani. You're on to our special coverage of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. First, the headlines. Belarus spotted holding military drills to the north of Ukraine. Blast reported in parts of Lviv, leaving a power outage and a shortage of water following Russian missiles hitting electric substations. Ukraine's president says 150 people have been evacuated from the Azovstal steel plant in Mariupol. Welcome again. We begin with news that Russia's closest ally in this war, Belarus, has begun large-scale military drills, a potential cause for alarm in Ukraine. According to the Belarusian Defense Ministry, the drills involve testing its army vehicles for combat readiness, but that the exercise does not pose a threat to neighbors. However, Ukraine says it's watching closely Belarus's activities. Overnight in the city of Lviv, firefighters battled to put out a blaze after explosions hit power stations across the city. Mayor Andriy Sadoviv said airstrikes cut off electricity in some districts and injured 2 people. Those reports, of course, cannot be independently verified, but explosions happened nearly 10 weeks into a war that has killed thousands of people, devastated cities, and driven 5 million Ukrainians out of their abode abroad. At least 3 Russian missiles hit electrical substations around the city of Lviv, close to the Polish border, late Tuesday. Parts of the city are now without power and water in the wake of what is thought to be an attack on the rail network as well. People ran onto the streets as the missiles hit and as news spread of the attack. These were the first Russian missile strikes in western Ukraine in more than a week. The western city of Lviv has been spared most of the fighting since Russia launched its invasion. Getting near the Polish border, Lviv is hundreds of miles from Russia's advance, and it's been one of the main destinations for Ukrainians forced to flee battle zones in the country. Well, the Kremlin on Friday said a proposal by U.S. President Joe Biden to allow U.S. officials to seize Russian assets and use the funds to support Ukraine would amount to illegal expropriation. President Joe Biden asked Congress for $33 billion to support Ukraine, a proposal that would also let U.S. officials seize more Russian oligarchs' assets, give the cash from those seizures to Ukraine, and further criminalize sanctions dodging. Also, Russia is prepared for this year's G20 summit in Indonesia, but has not yet decided whether President Vladimir Putin will attend in person or virtually. Indonesia is currently chairing the group of 20 major economies. It's invited both President Putin and President Volodymyr Zelensky to a leaders' summit in November, despite pressure from Western countries to exclude the Russian president. Dozens of evacuees who cowered for weeks in the ruins of a steel works in Russian-occupied Mariupol reached a safety in Kyiv-controlled Zaporizhia, where hospitals were ready to treat people for anything from burns to malnutrition. Russian forces pummeled the port city of Mariupol for nearly 2 months, turning it into a wasteland with an unknown death toll, and thousands of people tried to survive without water, sanitation, or food. Mariupol Mayor Vadim Boychenko said more than 200 civilians in the Sea of Azov port city, which has been devastated by weeks of Russian bombardments, and that 100,000 civilians were still in Mariupol. United Nations and International Committee of the Red Cross coordinated a 5-day operation on April 29th to bring women, children, and the elderly from the steel works. The sprawling Azovstal industrial complex became a refuge for both civilians and Ukrainian fighters as Moscow laid siege to Mariupol, devastating the city. Hospitals have been stocked up and supported by volunteers to prepare for the arrival of the convoy, according to the World Health Organization. President Volodymyr Zelensky says more than 156 evacuees from the ruins of Mariupol steelworks have reached the city of Zaporizhia. They arrived on Tuesday, following those days and weeks that they have been in a shelter, cowering from Russian shelling. In his address to the nation yesterday, the president accused Russia of breaching agreements to pause fighting long enough to allow vulnerable civilians to be moved to safety. For nearly 10 weeks into the war, it has killed thousands of people, destroyed cities, and driven 5 million Ukrainians to flee abroad. President Putin raised the economic stakes for Kyiv's Western backers on Tuesday by announcing plans to block the export of vital Russian raw materials. Mariupol, which was home to 400,000 people before the invasion, has seen the bloodiest fighting of the war, enduring weeks of siege and shelling. Speaking of the shellings, the governor of Luhansk has said that Russian shelling has killed 2 people and injured another 2 in the region. He revealed this on social media this morning, adding that 45 houses and other objects were damaged in the attack. He also says 4 houses in Severodonetsk, 12 in Lysychansk, and 7 in Orekov, 6 in Rubzny, as well as 4 in Griner, 4 in Popsana, 2 in Vrubivka were hit. The building of the Luhansk Medical Center for Dangerous Infectious Diseases in one of the cities, as well as city schools, were also engulfed in flames. We'll take a short break now. Our coverage continues shortly. Stay with us. Welcome back to our special coverage. Still taking a look at developments out of Ukraine today. The regional governor for Mariupol, Pavlo Krylenko, says more civilians are leaving the city today. He said so on Telegram this morning, as efforts have been supported by the United Nations and Red Cross, and some buses, he said, have already left the city today. He also says civilians are being evacuated to Ukrainian-controlled Zaporizhia from the Azov region. It's not clear, though, whether the evacuees had been sheltering inside the vast Azovstal steel plant, from which a group of people was finally evacuated on Sunday. Now, more now on the British Prime Minister Boris Johnson told the Ukrainian parliament on Tuesday. He said the West made a mistake in not helping Ukraine in 2014 when Russia annexed the country's Crimea Peninsula. He was quoted as saying, "We who are your friends must be humble about what happened in 2014 because Ukraine was invaded for the first time when Crimea was taken from Ukraine and the war in Donbass. We cannot make the mistake again," he said. He also announced a donation, military aid of £300 million to Ukraine over the next few weeks for military weapons, as well as to support the government in the country. Now, Britain's ambassador to Ukraine spoke about shock upon shock on the road back to Kyiv yesterday as she and her staff returned to the Ukrainian capital. Ambassador Melinda Simmons described seeing bombed-out playgrounds, schools and hospitals while driving through Kyiv region on the way to the city. She was appointed ambassador to Ukraine in 2019. She also talks about the personal experience of returning to the country, describing it as incredibly emotional and meaning an enormous amount. Simmons went on to say the UK and Ukraine were already working together to investigate allegations of war crimes in the country. Countries evacuated diplomatic staff before the outset of the war in February as troops launched a campaign towards the capital from the north. Russia withdrew troops from the north of Ukraine in early April.
Before this invasion. We drove through that, of course, because if you take the car, you come, into Kyiv Oblast, then you can see just how hard Russia tried to take Kyiv, and also just how quickly the focus became on hitting civilians and attacking civilians. And that is shock upon shock. We passed, bombed out playgrounds, bombed out schools, hospitals, burned out trees, twisted metal in farmland. So obvious, really, that right from the beginning, this was about hitting the Ukrainian nation. It wasn't just about taking out the military capability. I think that speaks to their inability to understand how Ukrainians value their nationhood. This is Ukrainians defending themselves against an invasion so that they can live peacefully. There's nothing more than that.
Do you think there will be justice for...
U.S. President Joe Biden was at the Alabama Lockheed plants on Tuesday making a case for his $33 billion Ukraine aid package. The Lockheed Martin co-facility manufactures the anti-tank Javelin missile, putting the spotlight on a weapon that has helped Ukraine fight Russia's invasion. President Biden used the visit to press Congress to approve his proposed $33 billion assistance package for Ukraine, including more than $20 billion in military aid. Aid to Ukraine has not been a subject of the usual partisan bickering among lawmakers, but $20 billion is a huge jump, and any legislative proposal can fall victim to political polarization in Washington. President Biden, who is a Democrat, has visited the state with his back Republican presidential candidates for decades to avoid that outcome. The U.S. has rushed to $3.4 billion worth of weapons to Ukraine since Russia invaded on February 24, including howitzers, anti-aircraft Stinger systems, javelins, ammunition, and body armor.
We know that the United States is leading our allies and partners around the world to make sure the courageous Ukrainians who are fighting for the future of their nation have the weapons and the capacity and ammunition and equipment to defend themselves against Putin's brutal war. A lot of war crimes being committed. But what we don't always see, is the work that that makes so much of this possible. And that's you. It's not hyperbole, it's you. You're making a gigantic difference for these poor sons of guns who are under such enormous pressure and firepower. Those javelins I saw, there's 10 for every tank that there is in Ukraine right now. You're changing people's lives. We built the weapons. No, you really did. Last week, I sent Congress, if you excuse the point of personal privilege, talking like an old senator, but sent a supplemental budget, a fancy way of saying we need more money, to make sure the United States can continue to send weapons directly to the front lines of freedom in Ukraine, and to continue to provide economic and humanitarian assistance to help the Ukrainian people. And I urge the Congress to pass this funding quickly to help Ukraine continue to succeed against Russian aggression, just as they did when they won the Battle of Kyiv. And to make sure the United States and our allies can replenish our own stocks of weapons to replace what we've sent to Ukraine. As I said from the beginning, this fight is not going to be cheap. But caving to aggression would even be more costly. We either back the Ukrainian people as they defend their country, or we stand by as Russia continues its atrocities and aggression. Rosy derivative action.
U.S. President Joe Biden. I have joining me now Dr. Sylvester Okere. He's a security and trade consultant on Africa, founder and president, Strategic Groups USA and United People for African Congress. Thank you, Dr. Okere, for joining me on the program this morning. I know it's pretty early where you are, so I do appreciate the sacrifice. And I know you've heard your president talk about, how much is going into Ukraine. He's asking for $33 billion, an aid package in, I think it's under the new Lend and Lease Act. He wants, Congress to approve. What do you make of this huge amounts, despite all the other billions of dollars that have gone into military donations and military aid to Ukraine so far?
First of all, thank you for having me, and my prayer goes out for those in Ukraine and the surrounding areas that are going through this pain. And again, this war shouldn't have taken place, but that's what happens when there is weak leadership. And all he does is spend and spend. There are a lot of problems in the country that is not taken into account. Sometimes people think that showing strong leadership is by inciting wars or doing things just to please people around. This was Biden who went to who met with President Putin in 2021 June, and he failed to address this issue. And on July, after a month, President Putin released a statement indicating his view about the relationship between Russia and Ukraine. At this time, President Biden should have arrested the situation. But now what he's doing is to observe and make comments and throw money around. So, but there are a lot of people, a lot of homeless people, a lot of veterans that are going through pain in this country. The people in Ukraine shouldn't have gotten to this situation. It's true that Russia is really destroying Ukraine, but at the same time, Russia is not gaining, and itself, the reputation is no longer what we think. You see, sometimes people always think that Russia is everybody gets scared of Russia. See what is happening, how Ukraine is taking them by surprise. So President Biden has failed in this area, and what gave Ukraine this kind of impetus is the way America pulled out, or the way Biden pulled out from Afghanistan. At that moment, these guys are saying this is what we can do, because this guy, America is not going to fight us. America is not going to resist us. And again, if America is not in this war, fighting this war, the world is not safe. You can't fight from the side. You can't be throwing money around. You need to go there so that the world can feel, like we have a leader leading us.
If I'm understanding what you're saying, America needs to put boots on the ground in Ukraine.
America, well, of course, we shouldn't have gone there, but you can't fight from the side. You can't be throwing stone here and there. You either get in and get out and prevent this war. There's a way you can do it. And first of all, it shouldn't have taken place. Look at President Trump. He was building peace all around. Throughout how many wars did he fight? None. He was returning the soldiers. And this is what a Democrat administration does. And the worst part of it is that they think that they know what you need, what you want in your country or in your home more than you yourself. Remember the time of President Goodluck Jonathan? That was exactly what Obama did. When Jonathan needed some warplane, he needed equipment to fight Boko Haram. What did President Obama did? Now, even the Polish generals wanted to offer to send airplanes to German military base in Germany. Biden resisted. He thinks he knows what the Ukrainians need more than the Ukrainians themselves. He thinks his generals know what the Ukrainian generals need. So at this time, it would be nice for America to get in and get out and stop this thing going on.
But you know that is exactly what the Russian President Vladimir Putin wants. And if America or any other country were to officially send boots on the ground in Ukraine, you've automatically declared a world war, because to the Russian government, this is a declaration of war. Other countries been involved in this. President Putin has said, he really does not appreciate, the donations, the military donations that have been made to Ukraine, and he wants these Western countries to stop sending those military donations to Ukraine, as they are already aggravating an already serious situation. You think that's a wise move, to be directly involved in this war, which is clearly between Russia and Ukraine?
The fact is that the war shouldn't have taken place, but as it is right now, if there is any remedy, because how long are you going to be throwing money? Lives are going, people are dying, kids, people are, children, schools, women, everybody dying. So how long are you going to be throwing money? Will the money solve it? And actually, we know that indirectly, it's not just Ukraine fighting the war. Ukraine, do we think that they are more sophisticated that way to handle or tackle Russia? We know that at least they are getting a lot of support, but thank God for the Polish government really backing them and supporting them strongly. But I don't think throwing money going to solve the problem alone, because somebody has to get in there and stop it.
Well, I know that, that there are some, U.S. veterans who are on the ground who are helping Ukrainian soldiers either in training or they're equally fighting the war, but that's on unofficial level, because they were not sent by the U.S. government. But as to, the military, the monies you're talking about, they're going into purchase of weapons. And I do understand your point, as to, whether these Ukrainian soldiers are able to handle those weapons. But you talk about, what will stop this war. What suggestions do you have, apart from, the diplomatic avenues that have been explored, as well as the military and humanitarian?
What is the role of NATO right there? Because all we're hearing, and as the war is going, there's massive propaganda. No one knows what is true and what is not. But this is the time to empower NATO to get in there. When I say get in, doesn't mean America alone getting in there, but at least empower NATO. They need to have a concerted decision that we are going into solve this problem and stop it once and for all. No matter what, you can throw money as much as you want. This is going to linger. It's just like the fight for Osama bin Laden that lingered for several years. So decision has to be taken. Boots has to be on the ground systematically and strategically and stop the war.
So some analysts have traced, the reason why this war is already in existence to the fact that Ukraine wants to join NATO, or wanted to join NATO. Now they've accepted being neutral, but they wanted to join NATO, and they also wanted to join the European Union, which is why Russia is invading Ukraine, because they say this is a special military operation, and this is to denazify Ukraine in the end. So where really is the role of NATO that you're asking? NATO is the main reason why this war exists in Ukraine already.
And that's the biggest mistake that Ukraine has made, and I think they've learned their lesson. I wonder what America would do if Mexico decide today that they want to join NATO.
Sorry, but you're asking NATO to get involved in Ukraine already. You're saying that that's one of the solutions to this war, but that's one of the reasons why this war exists in the first place.
Well, the role of NATO is to fight this kind of war to defend countries, not just America going alone. That's why I made that comment. Instead of America, because if America get in now, the whole world going to say America is fighting, but regardless, it has to go. And the reason NATO exists is this kind of situation. Even though it's because of NATO that this is happening, but we understand it's because Ukraine wanted to join NATO, which they shouldn't have. And that's that statement that Putin made, I think, on July 12th, his intention and what he thinks is the relationship between Ukraine and Russia. So NATO has to play their role and play it strategically. Dodging is not the answer, just like Germany have been playing hide and seek and other countries playing hide and seek. So are we going to just leave it and be throwing money? No. Only Polish government has taken a lot of, massive help on that. Over 60% of the refugees are being harbored by the Polish government. But the rest of the country under NATO need to get involved.
Again, I ask, what would be the solution to ending this war in Ukraine? Because President Putin says he's got a plan that he must follow through. He's asked Western nations to stop military donations. He's asked them to stop helping Ukraine, as it's only making matters worse. So in your opinion, what would help to stop this war?
In every war, there is always a solution, and that solution is peace. But it takes that's what I'm really surprised. Someone like Joe Biden, who paraded himself as the Methuselah in politics, who believe that he knows foreign policy more than every other person, and believe that he knows diplomacy more than every other person. See what he did in Afghanistan. See what is going on right now. And that tells you that this administration has failed, not just America, they have failed the world. And actually, that is what democratic leadership knows very well to do. And their power is just propaganda. They can use propaganda to make the world think that everything is okay. But at this moment, in my own opinion, from what we see, no amount of money is going to stop it. An adult is going to rise up there and stop this, either by peaceful negotiation. And that's the reason I refer to the former president, my best president. Throughout his tenure, there was no single war. And this wouldn't have happened under President Trump. The whole world knows that. Biden knows that. Democrat knows that this would never have taken place under President Donald J. Trump. So what are the strategies? How did he negotiate peace around the Middle East? So why is it that everything that was built, Biden is destroying it? Every good thing that was built, not only President Trump, even the previous administration, Biden is destroying it. All he do is talk. And I wonder how people were so blind to elect such a lifeless, belligerent old man to come and rule the country, who doesn't know what he is doing. See what he did in Afghanistan. And that is what made President Putin to say, you know what, I'm going to jump in. And very soon, China will try their own.
So, we're talking about, solutions. I'm still yet to hear the solutions that you're providing, to ending this war, apart from lambasting the U.S. president and, propping up the previous president, Donald Trump, who you said had a peaceful time. But you do understand the United States did come out of a war in Afghanistan, which was fought for over 20 years. And I do understand the government really is not keen on taking on another war. But if you're looking at the way President Volodymyr Zelensky has been handling this crisis all along, what do you make of his strategy towards Russia since the start of this invasion?
Both the Russian administration, the U.S. administration, and the world leaders, I believe they know what they are doing. This can be stopped. This can be stopped if really they want to do that.
How?
But I don't think
how can it be stopped?
And if peaceful is ceasefire. First of all, make sure that both sides understand that and obey that and get in, not inciting one side, not trying to provoke one side. We know that Russia has made a mistake. We can call him a crazy man, whatever we want to call him, but we need to go on a peaceful solution. United Nations, NATO, American government, everyone need to step in and stop that. People are dying. No amount of negotiation, no amount of debate, no amount of money pouring over that region will stop that if we keep doing what we're doing. We need to go on a peaceful solution. This is a war that could have been averted if we have a leader that knows what he's doing.
You talk about a peaceful solution, and President Vladimir Putin has, his first request was that Ukraine, of course, calls off its intentions to join NATO and the European Union. President Zelensky, in the course of this war, did say Ukraine will eventually remain neutral, but Russia continues with this invasion and continues, with this assault on Ukraine, and it's been difficult getting back to the negotiation table for weeks now, despite, Ukraine's willingness to finally end this war. It was only over the weekend that a ceasefire was finally called. Thanks to the UN and to the Red Cross, we're able to get people out of the city of Mariupol. You're talking about negotiations. How do we get there? How do we get back to the negotiating table? I think which is what probably Ukraine and the rest of the world is asking at this time, with President Putin digging in his heels and refusing to move on what he wants out of this war.
I always believe that every madman has a friend. No matter how difficult Putin may be, no matter how dangerous he is, there is still a situation. There is still a way to negotiate that and stop it. And also, you can't be negotiating if you are inciting it at the other side. So you anger him. And I think that is what makes him, if a peaceful peace negotiation is called and he breaks that, well, the whole aspect of the region has to be calm and let him call everyone to order and have a way to get in there. And I think the United Nations and NATO can solve it.
Let's look at the sanctions that have been placed on Russia, and there are thousands of them already on the Russian government. So now Russia's striking back, with the payment for gas with ruble, and European countries trying to kick back against that as well. What do you make of that?
But I think that's also one of the reasons he's doing, because he knows he got the region on his palm. He knows what his country can offer. He might be mad, he might be crazy, but I like leaders who stand up, who take action, but not in a useless or wicked way this way. But he knows that no matter what, the East European nations depend on him on the side of oil and some other mineral resources that they get from Ukraine. And if the United Nations, the NATO, and American government will listen to him, hear him out, and call both to the table, I think the war will be over. You know, I remember when Trump was coming in, everyone was saying, oh, Ukraine, Putin and Trump cannot rule together. Putin and Trump and what's his name? North Korea cannot. It takes a leader to lead, not just politics. The time for politics is not in this war. And the world needs to understand that, the leader needs to understand that. The problem is that we have a leader that is clueless. If he knows what he's doing after 50 years in politics and in diplomacy, he can solve this problem than inciting or fighting from behind.
Dr. Sylvester Kiri, it's been a real pleasure speaking with you. Thank you for joining me this morning.
You're welcome. God bless.
Another break now when we come back. Well, talking about more sanctions now on Russia as the EU plans for sanctions on oil, the military and television. Stay with us. Welcome back to our special coverage of the war in Ukraine. We're still looking at those developments out of the country. In Bucha, a devastated suburb of Kyiv, drivers waited hours to get just a small amount of fuel today. They, like millions of other Ukrainians, face several weeks of possibly longer of fuel disruption. The Kyiv region has also seen a spike in demand as large numbers of civilians returned following Russia's failed attack on the capital. Moscow's strikes on energy infrastructure, transportation issues and supply cutoff by Russia and Belarus have hit supplies. The Russian Navy has blockaded Ukraine's Black Sea ports, which has stopped tankers from renewing stocks. The gas shortage has closed around half the country's 7,000 service stations. The government said in a statement shortages would stop by the end of the week as Ukrainian retailers had new contracts with European suppliers, but distributing those supplies could be a challenge. So we talked about more sanctions for Ukraine. The European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has given details of a sixth package of sanctions to be agreed in the coming days for Russia. She listed 4 separate types of sanctions. High-ranking Russian military officials who commit war crimes in Bucha and Mariupol are to be targeted. She said, we know who you are. You will not get away with this. Sberbank, Russia's largest bank, is to be disconnected from the SWIFT bank transfer system. Today, 3 big state-owned broadcasters are to be cut off from the EU on cable, satellite, or the internet as what she called mouthpieces that amplify Putin's lies. Ms. von der Leyen said the EU is also now saying an end to its dependency on Russian oil. She says it will not be easy, but we simply have to do it.
Signal to all perpetrators of the Kremlin. Today, we are presenting our 6th package of sanctions. First, we are listing high-ranking military officers and individuals who committed war crimes in Bucha, and those who are responsible for the inhuman siege of the city of Mariupol. This sends another important signal to all perpetrators of the Kremlin. We know who you are. We will hold you accountable. You're not getting away with this. Second, we finally de-SWIFT Sberbank. Sberbank is the largest Russian bank. It holds round about 37% of the whole banking sector. And we will also de-SWIFT 2 other major banks in Russia. By that, we hit banks that are systemically critical to the Russian financial system and Putin's ability to wage destruction. We're banning 3 big Russian state-owned broadcasters from our airwaves. They will not be allowed to distribute their content anymore in the European Union in whatever shape or form, be it on cable, via satellite, on the internet, or via smartphone apps. We have identified these TV channels as mouthpieces that amplify Putin's lies and propaganda aggressively. And we should not give them a stage anymore to spread these lies. Today, we are addressing our dependency on Russian oil, and let's be clear, it will not be easy. because some member states are strongly dependent on Russian oil, but we simply have to do it. So today we will propose to ban all Russian oil from Europe. This will be a complete import ban on all Russian oil, seaborne and pipeline, crude and refined. Putin wanted to wipe out Ukraine from the map, and he will clearly not succeed. On the contrary, Ukraine has risen in bravery and in unity, and it is his own country, Russia, that Putin is sinking. Honourable members, we want Ukraine to win this war.
Tough words from the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen on those sanctions on Russia. Now, Greece has inaugurated the start of construction on a new floating liquefied natural gas terminal to improve gas supply to southeastern Europe and reduce reliance on Russian gas supplies. Leaders of Bulgaria, Serbia and North Macedonia attended the ceremony in the northeastern port city of Alexandroupolis, where the terminal is to be located, along with European Council President Charles Michel, as the European Union seeks solutions for EU nations to decrease their dependency on Russian gas following the invasion of Ukraine. Kyiv says Russia's energy exports to Europe, so far largely exempt from international sanctions, are funding the Kremlin war effort. EU countries have paid more than 47 billion euros to Russia for gas and oil since it invaded Ukraine. That's according to a research organization, the Center for Research on Energy and Clean Air. Greece, on the other hand, has been helping Bulgaria with gas after Russia cut off supplies last week. Greece also recently announced it was speeding up gas exploration and other energy projects that would cut the country's reliance on Russian gas, which is about 30% annually, and is seeking to replace the country on the map as an energy hub. The government is also increasing focus on renewable energy projects.
Russia's war in Ukraine is a moment of urgency. Probably it's also a moment of truth for the European Union. We must build our European sovereignty. We must be more strategic, and we must forge our new energy independence.
Together, we can achieve so much more, and we can be an engine for European growth as a whole. So, when we're on the brink of such high adversity with the war in Ukraine, these type of strategic moves are even more important.
President Vladimir Putin on Tuesday signed an executive order giving Russia the authority to halt exports and cancel contracts to retaliate against unfriendly nations, he says. Putin has ordered his government to draw up a sanctions list in 10 days. The broad directive aims to protect the national interests of the Russian Federation in response to unfriendly actions which contradict international law undertaken by the US and joined by other foreign states and international organizations. Putin's executive order came as the Russian economy is set for its biggest contraction in about 3 decades amid hard-hitting sanctions from the US and its allies over the war in Ukraine. Our business correspondent, Ini John McQuarrie, is here to talk about a lot more. Let's begin with the new sanctions, the 6th package announced by the EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen that attack, well, she says is a complete ban on Russian imports. Can the EU or can Europe survive without Russia?
That's obviously very ambitious, very, very ambitious, because we do know that there have been efforts by a lot of EU countries since the beginning of the war to get alternative to oil, which is why even the EU now is talking to African countries. Yesterday we talked about, how they're looking to improve cooperation with Nigeria, Algeria, and I think Angola, to beef up and see how they can bring up investment that can supply gas, especially to the EU. But obviously that's a long term. Those are investments that you don't just start and get them done you know, you have to
It could
start.
take years.
Exactly, and it takes a while. So I really don't know how the EU countries are going to survive. We do know that, for instance, Poland are already talking about cutting down on their flights. You know, Germany, as they started their plan about a month ago. They have a 3-step plan. And yesterday, what they did is that they have started collating, or they started a survey where they would know how much power or energy industries and manufacturers need to survive. So what they plan to do, according to their plan, is that they will now strategize and prioritize households who need warmth, you know, energy for warm and heat and all that, and they'll give that. So what happens, they now have a bank, you know, to where they collect the gas or they preserve it, and then they now prioritize who they will give it to. These are strategies that you don't see being sustained, you know, which is why the issue of recession comes into talk. When this research they did some months ago shows that if Germany, for instance, suddenly cuts off from Russian gas, they're going to go into deep recession. Because it's going to affect production, it's going to affect manufacturing, it's going to affect everyday life, you know, because they use it for both the big work and the small work, the warmth at home, you know, the survival and all that. So I don't know what the plan is, but it's very ambitious. I mean, I know before now, they did say they were going to phase it out, you know, by the end of the year, or at 2/3, what they said is 2/3 of it by the end of the year. I mean, that's the first thing, but phasing it out immediately, I don't know, sounds really, really ambitious.
Yeah, because this war came on suddenly.
It came on suddenly,
It came on suddenly, so there were no preparations for it. So most of the countries are playing, you know, their actions by ear.
Catch up, yeah.
You know, what's going on. It's really, how will Europe survive this, I think, is the question.
And you know, it's becoming a very present threat. When you look at what has happened to Poland and Bulgaria, and then you see that by the end of this month, the middle of this month, there's another set of contracts that has to be renewed, or, you know, then the tap will be turned off.
Yes.
So it's a very present threat.
Yeah, Greece, I think, has some solution. They said they're inaugurating the start of construction on a new floating liquefied natural gas terminal to improve gas supply. And I'm thinking, you know, they're just very short months to until winter returns.
Yes.
So a lot of cuts, a lot of adjustments will be made. It almost seems like, you know, we're back to a World War II situation. I didn't see the war, but you know, it's more like, you know, what was described back then. You know, a shortage of stuff, rationing of, you know, supplies and everything. Just wondering, you know, how those countries will survive.
Yes, we wonder. And even when you talk about Greece, I mean, these things, whether it's Nigeria or out of Nigeria.
Isn't it tougher for Greece, though? Because they've had they've had quite a serious economic crisis over the years, at least in the last 10 years. It's been pretty tough for them. Twice, I think,
this might give them an opportunity to earn more revenue. But the truth is, or the reality is, how will they live up to it in such a short time? Because these things take time. You know, you don't just wake up and put on a pipeline. You invest, you strategize, you construct, and then you bring it, you know, and before you now connect it. You know, so, I mean, I really wonder how they would do it, but we're watching and we're here to report it.
Yeah, and Russia, though, trying to survive, you know, amidst these sanctions, cutting off, you know, exports, imports from unfriendly countries with these actions.
Exactly. So Russia is not just folding its arms to say, oh, you guys just bring on your sanctions. They also have their own sanctions. And so you see, one of the first things is the threat that could cut off exports. Already, they have done some things. I mean, it doesn't sound so impactful, banning some Western leaders from coming into the country because they don't really need it at this time.
Yeah, but how big is the Russian economy, though? You know, when they're talking about banning all of these imports, how important is the Russian economy to the rest of Europe and to the rest of the world? I mean, if Russia is going to be banning exports, if they're going to be banning imports, you know, from these countries, how important is their economy to the rest of the world?
Well, Russia is very important. Like we've talked about many times, Russia has developed a lot of its sectors. You know, you talk of the grains, they are there. You talk of the gas, you talk of the oil, they are there. You talk of especially oil and gas. But, you know, with the ban, other countries are feeling it, you know, but they are feeling it more at this time. For instance, oil and gas, I know you were reading about the oil and gas revenue and all that. In March, oil and gas revenue to Russia was down about 38%. So they are feeling that pinch that we are talking about. But they have also done some seizures too, affecting Western. You know, some corporates left Russia in a hurry in the midst of this.
And left their assets behind.
They seized those assets. You know, they do a lot of aviation plans and contracts. Russia has seized planes worth about $10 billion. So they have also done something.
So what would they do with the planes? I mean, who did they have to sell it, of course, to?
No, they're not selling it. You know, because
them.
Russia is really big, so their aviation sector is very active, and so they are using it, and they claim it as their own domestic, for their domestic flights and their domestic property. But the problem with that is most of those planes were not made by Russians. The parts for maintenance and the expertise does not or do not belong to Russians. So even though they are keeping it, you know, they will have that challenge of maintaining, or it might just cause a lot of risk, safety risk, you know, for them, because the parts are no longer there. The expertise, you know, the Boeing and all that, they are no longer working with them. So, I mean, they might have the plane, but maintaining and sustaining that aviation sector might be a big problem for them, you know. And yeah, they have the corporates, the assets that they have seized and all that. But I mean, President Putin has said we're expecting a list of his own sanctions, and that'll be in 10 days. So we'll follow that space and see.
Counter sanctions against the West.
Yes.
Well, can't wait to see who and who will be on that list and what is on that list.
What is on that list?
What is on that list? That's what's most important. Ini, thanks again for speaking with me.
Thank you for having me.
Great having you all week. I hope we can continue this relationship until the end.
until the war ends. But really, I can't wait for the war to end.
Honestly, affecting almost everything. Thanks again.
Yeah.
Moving on now, the head of the Red Cross in Ukraine says an unknown number of civilians remain trapped in Mariupol and surrounding areas after evacuating more than 100 of them from the Azovstal steel plant. There were some who did not want to board the buses out of Mariupol. They expressed concern about intense fighting, which has resumed around the plant and inside the plant. But the ICRC says it will continue to press for access to those remaining civilians. Mariupol's sprawling Azovstal industrial complex and its bunkers and civilian and Ukrainian fighters have become refugees, taking refuge, in the Azovstal steel plant, where Moscow's troops have laid siege to in the city of Azov. In sports news now, the sale of Chelsea has been thrown into doubt over disagreements about what will happen to the £2.5 billion the club is expected to be sold for. A consortium led by US businessman Todd Boehly is the preferred bidder to buy Chelsea, but the UK government will not allow the sale to go through unless it is completely certain Roman Abramovich will not receive any of the proceeds. 2 months ago, Abramovich put Chelsea up for sale, saying he would not be asking for his loans to the club to be repaid. However, a report by The Times says the West London club told the UK government, as well as bidding groups, that they want to restructure the handover process, thereby throwing a blanket of doubt over the proceedings. Abramovich was sanctioned by the government on March 10, preventing him from doing any business in the UK. Russia has wrongfully detained WNBA star Brittney Griner after the U.S. citizen was seized at Moscow airport on February 17 on drug charges. The U.S. Department said the athlete, who is 31 years old, played for a Russian team during the WNBA off-season since 2015. A two-time Olympic gold medalist, the All-Star Griner is widely regarded as the best female basketball player of all time. The White House says finding represents a step up in efforts to free Griner more than 2 months after she was detained in the Russian capital. Well, that's our coverage this morning. Thanks for watching. I'm Amarachi Ubani.